Hello, brothers and sisters. Raven here. And today I'm going to have to go into something I hoped not to. Um, while going through more of Only Two Choices by Blair Adams, I was hoping to get to the next chapter because the title of it made me very curious. I just was very interested where he was going with it. However, in trying to get there, something else came up, and I'd hoped I could just let it go because it was just something very tiny, indirect, didn't really state much, but then it went further. So I can't resist. I've got to go into this, bring it up, point it out. Not so much because this is something that I think I need to reveal. This just shows more of how he never gives the answer. He always avoids some of it. Homestead heritage, always. You ask questions, you pose things, they're going to try to give an indirect answer almost every time, and they're never going to give you the whole picture. For instance, if you remember the video I did a little bit ago about how they take that one part of First John where it mentions the Trinity and they try to say, oh, that verse doesn't fit, when really it's only a few words of that verse. But they never show you the verse, they never talk about what part, they never show you what really belongs there, what doesn't. They just say it doesn't and leave it at that. That's the way this is going. So I'm going to show you a part of this where he kind of goes into a little bit of how Jesus tells them not to be following their law, the way the Pharisees, Sadducees, pushed the old law. But he's not going to go and actually say that. He's going to say their law. He's got to narrow it down. And because of it, there's a lot of hypocrisy in what he says in this. And I'm going to try to avoid talking about that. It's not easy, but I'm going to try to avoid just getting into that and focus on what I really want to get at here. So I'm going to read a couple quotes from the book, and then we'll get into it a bit, and then show a bit of scripture. So, first one was when he first started to go down this road. He said this: the Mosaic law, though seen as given by God, albeit given by the hand of angelic mediators, that is, the Elohim, a crucial point of understanding the law, a point developed extensively elsewhere. I'm not going to go into that right now. There's things about this statement that do make me worry, but I don't want to dig into that. I'm just letting you see it. But maybe I'll go into it another time. Maybe if somehow I reach a point where there's not a whole lot I want to talk about and I want to do a video on this, maybe we'll do that. But for now, I don't want to go into it. So that's there for you to see if you want to look at it, but I'm not going into that side of it. But he continues. Had been interpreted in such a way that it had been thoroughly corrupted, impaired, and transmitted into an instrument of human self-aggrandizement, much in keeping with all the other religious systems of such a world. Okay, sounds good, right? True. But note, what he's really doing here, you're going to see in the next part. Now, like I said, a lot of hypocrisy in that. I see a ton of it. But you'll see a little bit more of how in a second. This next quote is a little more chaotic. And this is where it reaches that point where he's trying to sort of reinterpret scripture to make it fit what they want. He says, people had transmuted the Mosaic law into merely an instrument of human self-exaltation and aggrandizement based on intimidation and fear. Consider that for a second. Then even it, too, had been reshaped in its Hellenized scribal guise into an expression of this destructive power. Paul would later indicate this in his letter to the Galatians. There he wrote to the church that it was being bewitched to come back under this adulterated scribal law, and he indicates that by doing this, they are coming again under the control of these same dominions and powers. As G. Delling notes about the letter to the Galatians, it seems to number the law as interpreted by Hellenizing scribes among the Stoicheta. I don't know much about that. And 4:8-9 seems to include false gods. What's the problem? Notice what he's doing here. He's trying to make it look so bad the way they're putting the law. But he's never getting at what John's really talking about here. Because he still wants a law for people to follow. That's what they do at Homestead. They've got all these rules, all these standards you have to follow. They follow a law. He wants to show this is the wrong law, not the law is gone. And so that's what he's doing here. He's trying to make it look like this is all about that particular version of the law is the problem. But what I want to do is show you what this passage is and show you why this is pointing at it, verses 8 and 9. But remember what he's getting at here. This whole idea is that this is about the way that they're using this scribal law the wrong way, how it's being tweaked, or as he quoted it as saying, bewitched to follow this law. Let's see what verses 8 and 9 have to do with that. It says this: But then, indeed, when you did not know God, you served those which by nature are not gods. But now after you have known God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you turn again to the weak and beggarly elements to which you desire again to be in bondage? This in no way clarifies who they're talking about. This particular passage, these two verses that they narrow it down to, tell you nothing of what exactly the topic is. You need more to know what this is saying. He also mentioned verse 3, so let's go to that whole section before it. Let's look at the whole start of chapter 4. It says this: Now I say that the heir, as long as he is a child, does not differ at all from a slave, though he is master of all, but is under guardians and stewards until a time appointed by the Father. Even so, we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. But when the fullness of the time had come, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman, born under the law, to redeem those who were under the law, that he might receive the adoption as sons. And because you are sons, God has sent forth the Spirit of his Son into your hearts, crying out, Abba, Father. Therefore you are no longer a slave, but a son. And if a son, then an heir of God through Christ. This is talking all about being out of the law, out from under it, because he sent his Son. This is about being rid of the law, not cleaning it up, not removing how it got twisted, being free of it. But consider what verse 3 is. Why do they only point to verse 3 and not the rest of 1 through 7? It's the part that says, Even so, we, when we were children, were in bondage under the elements of the world. He takes out this particular verse and references it because it's the part that can sound like what he's talking about, he talks about the law, is the law of the world, not the law of God. So, what he's doing here is he's taking out the part that he can make fit into what he wants to imply. Because he wants you to think this is all about getting out from under the bondage of the elements of the world. No. That is what led up to what this is about. Because it's after that it says, redeem those who were under the law. He wants this whole passage to be about how you're getting away from this false law of the Pharisees to the real law. You're getting away from the elements of the world to the elements of homestead heritage. Now, one thing in this that bothered me, I don't know if you guys noticed it. I wouldn't be surprised if some of you did. But there's that word he used that he quoted, but was not in what we just looked at. Bewitched. So where is that word used? Is that word used, or is it in a different form in Scripture? Or is he just coming up with that out of thin air? So I searched. Turns out it's in the chapter before that. So why didn't he reference that part of Galatians? Well, let's read it, and I think you'll understand why. O foolish Galatians, who has bewitched you that you should not obey the truth, before whose eyes Jesus Christ was clearly portrayed among you as crucified? This only I want to learn from you. Did you receive the Spirit by the works of the law, or by the hearing of faith? Are you so foolish? Having begun in the Spirit, are you now being made perfect by the flesh? Have you suffered so many things in vain, if indeed it was in vain? Therefore, he who supplies the Spirit to you and works miracles among you, does he do it by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? Just as Abraham believed God, and it was accounted to him for righteousness. Therefore, know that only those who are of faith are sons of Abraham. And the Scripture, foreseeing that God would justify the Gentiles by faith, preached the gospel to Abraham beforehand, saying, in you all nations shall be blessed. So then those who are of faith are blessed with believing Abraham. When this word bewitched is used, it is not used the way he implies. Let's see how he did it again. There he wrote to the church that it was being bewitched to come back under this adulterated scribal law. The passage doesn't say anything about scribal law. It says, do you receive the Spirit by the works of the law or by the hearing of faith? It's not by the works of their law or the works of the Mosaic law. It's by the works of the law or the hearing of faith. This passage in Galatians 3, that he is taking this word out of, is going directly against what he wants to teach. He doesn't want it to be about faith instead of law. We've seen it in multiple quotes I've shown before, where he tried to treat faith as though it was works, works as though it was faith. He flipped everything of that. And now here, he's trying to get you to believe that when it's talking against the law, it's not talking against the law, it's talking about their way of using the law. Because if you look at it the way it's said, instead of the way he wants it to be said, you're not going to follow him. This section, he's talking as though they're leading the wrong direction, as though saying, this is where you shouldn't go. But then he doesn't turn around and tell you where to go, because he doesn't want to say it flat out. He's scared to tell you exactly what he wants you to do. He only wants to start pointing out what not to do to try and get you to do it indirectly. Mind games. That's what this is. Consider the verses they quoted again, Galatians 8 and 9, and think about it within that situation. Stop and think about the fact that this chapter and the chapter before have been talking about being out of the law, about it being by faith. And considering what he's doing, let's look at Galatians 4, 8, and 9 with those thoughts in mind. But then, indeed, when you did not know God, you served those which by nature are not God's. But now after you have known God, or rather are known by God, how is it that you turn again to the weak and beggarly elements, to which you desire again to be in bondage? This is talking about exactly what Blair does, what Homestead Heritage does. He couldn't show you the context because it was going to go and point directly at him instead of what he wanted it to point at. It's a warning I realize I should state directly, because I've shown it again and again, but I've never come out and flat out said it to you. If you read their books, if you read their documents, if you go into their studies, when they show you a reference, read it, but not just it, all of the passage. And do not let it do what they want it to do. They hope that gives you the impression they're following Scripture. So that either you just trust them, or if you decide to look at the passage, because they're giving you this passage, it must show what they're saying. Don't let them create these assumptions in your head when you do it. Go and look at it, and look at what's around it. Try reading Galatians again. Read the whole book. Read the whole letter. And see if you can fit what he's trying to do with this into everything but these two verses. If it can fit in there, maybe he's got something, but it doesn't fit in anything else. It's the reason he had to specify these verses. Hope you guys have a good week. I'll probably see you Friday if I can get the next video done. Like I said, this next section looks like it's going to be interesting. I hope it's not too much, because if it's what it looks like it could be, I may not get the next video done next week, but we'll see. And I'll see you guys then. God bless.